Lumiose City has drawn in masses of Pokemon thanks to the power of Ange, a biomechanical creature designed to absorb the power of life energy. The same life energy that is emitted by the Pokemon that gives Xerneas. But all of this goes far deeper, as the life energy that Xerneas releases will create alpha Pokemon. Yveltal becomes attracted to this excess energy, arriving in order to restore balance and take life away from all that exists within Lumiose. And Zygarde has already been here, preparing to reach the zenith of its power, not only anticipating the arrival of these Pokemon, but also the eventual mass destruction that Ange will cause at the peak of its power. A power that will create and attract masses of mega Pokemon and flip the ecosystem of Lumiose City on its head. Howdy there, I'm Krillic, and we're going to begin with diving right into our legendary Pokemon that have made their way into Lumiose City. These Pokemon are not only attracted to the sheer amount of life energy collected here, but are also aiming to find a way to use and balance it. The same can actually be said regarding the many Pokemon that have migrated into the city, making habitats that are then enclosed through the power of Holotech controlled by Quizartico. But what's strange about the legendary Pokemon in particular is that they don't even arrive until after the climax of the main story, being the moment after Ange effectively fired its Light of Ruin. Something that would have as much power, if not arguably far more power, than when Lysander fired the ultimate weapon. I'll be explaining the meaning behind all of this, and then we'll be diving into the ecology of our wild zones throughout Lumiose and how they actually make perfect sense as habitats for our dear Pokemon. Now, I will admit I feel like a broken record, as I've said this in basically every video leading up to now, but allow me to throw some spice on this, because I've figured out far more details as to potentially why Xerneas is here. Now, Xerneas, again, is the giver of life. Its power and Yveltal's power have been shown to have been the crux of all that has happened within Kalos ever since AZ used the ultimate weapon to first bring his Floette back to life. Because the purpose of Xerneas is to release life energy into the world of Pokemon evenly over the course of time, it might make a Lumina Pokemon in Yveltal or create a Mega Pokemon directly, but its primary purpose is truly to keep life flowing. This energy being that which Yveltal takes from other Pokemon. When we look at its role before its short-lived arrival within Lumiose, it was used in firing the ultimate weapon, which has now been 100% confirmed to help create Mega Stones every single time that it has been fired. And it may have even been part of the reason why we are seeing additional Mega Pokemon within the Mega Dimension. The reason behind all of this is because Mega Stones are quite literally solidified marbles of dense life energy. It's something that has been indirectly confirmed for a long time within the games, and has been pretty directly confirmed within the Pokemon Adventures manga. It just took Legends ZA to catch the games up to the speed of the lore of everywhere else. But one thing we really don't talk about is what happens after Xerneas, or even the Yveltal after the events of X and Y. We often assume that legendary Pokemon are captured by us as the main character, then we just keep them for the rest of our mortal life, maybe throw them into a bird cage, underwater, you name it, right? Little aquarium for Kyogre, but that is hardly ever the case in lore. Even just by looking at the games, think of every single time that we have run into Mewtwo, the number of times we've run into Rayquaza, the legendary beasts, and so many other legendary Pokemon. Because while I do strongly believe that there are multiple of many of our legendary Pokemon, it would still make sense for legendary and mythical Pokemon to not be completely under the care of a mortal human. If we decide to look at the Adventures manga, it is actually incredibly dangerous to be the trainer of a legendary Pokemon. The sheer amount of energy required to bond and work alongside any powerful Pokemon actually puts a strain on the human body. Even just regular Pokemon battles have been shown to wear out the trainer in all forms of Pokemon media. But it is only within the Pokemon manga that we get cases like Cyrus bleeding from the eyes while trying to control Dialga and Palkia, or even champion Steven Stone dying from exhaustion after controlling the 3 original Reggies. And as a small note, the only time that you probably theoretically keep a Pokemon for an incredibly long time is Reshiram and Zekrom, who you have to catch, but even then, they will eventually leave you and then be chosen, or rather choose, another individual to be the hero of Unova. And while yes, we keep one of the dragons in a Pokeball ourselves, they're not always kept in Pokeballs. They just kind of form into their slumbering forms, but that's neither here nor there. in long story shortened, the legendary Pokemon are not meant to be under the control of a human, and so somewhere between the end events of X and Y and the appearance of our legendary Pokemon within ZA, they were released by our protagonist, allowing them to continue regulating the flow of life as intended. Now, Xerneas was already not back at full power within the events of X and Y. It was forcefully awakened and drained of whatever energy it was able to build up from its time hibernating as that big old tree, meaning that it's probably going to be another couple thousand years before it can get back to its peak power. This then means that after Ange fired off all that energy at the end of our story, Xerneas was attracted here as part of its goal to not only regulate the sheer amount of excess energy within the area, but maybe even to also restore its own power. And since Xerneas is still the Pokemon that gives life energy, its natural presence brings about the advent of 3 anomalous alpha Pokemon appearing in 3 separate wild zones. Pokemon that otherwise do not have a natural habitat within Lumiose and do not appear within the wild at all if we don't include when they may also appear as alphas within Wild Zone 20. This then makes Xerneas fulfill its cyclical role within the ecosystem and the circle of life as a whole, by distributing this energy to others. But of course, this is only half of our circle, for there is no giving of life without the power of Yveltal, who takes life and allows for Xerneas to reincarnate those who are lost by death itself. Now, Yveltal is of course what helps make this all function, though it goes far deeper than just some long-tailed widow bird that absorbs life itself from everything it passes. In fact, Yveltal's abilities explain another important piece of ecology within Kalos itself, and that would be the Menhir stones. These stones normally output energy in some capacity. In doing so, the energy is let out into the atmosphere for a reason we still don't quite understand. If anything, it is similar to how Xerneas releases life energy. As such, we can speculate that this is effectively the planet balancing itself out. And if we do, then it would make sense when we think about things such as the ultimate weapon. With the use of the ultimate weapon, it released massive amounts of energy into the world with both times that it fired. This energy doesn't get to just disappear. It has to be placed inside of something, used up in some capacity, you name it. And if all of it crashed into the planet or into the atmosphere and space, then it explains why we see mega stones in meteors and we see them underground. Though for any energy not turned into mega stones, it still exists and has to be used up. And to make matters worse, if a Pokemon is attached to these Menhir stones, then their energy can be drawn away from them, the very same ability that Yveltal has. Within ZA, Yveltal is first seen as a strange object flying towards the city before it is identified and eventually arrives at the Rouge District's Galerie de la Lune. And it is explicitly stated that the only real way to stop Yveltal is to catch it. This is because it can just recover life energy from everything and everyone around it and then fly into a rage. It is a creature that can effectively fight forever, just constantly drawing energy and killing others to fill itself back up and continue the fight, and that's assuming that it doesn't fly into a rage before we begin our battle with it, which would then spell true disaster and explains why we have to stop it. It is described to have been so powerful that it took out an entire Team Flare unit while still in its dormant state, and it took their very best to contain it, including Malva. Now, it's apparently fully awake and filled with energy. Ultimately, Yveltal isn't going to be a terrible issue as long as it doesn't go on its rampage in the middle of the city, because once it begins, there really is probably no way to actually stop it. It's less about how it affects the immediate ecosystem, more about how it could affect how the entirety of the ecosystem even functions, how it could throw everything out of whack by even taking a couple of different sections of life away from the world. It's like pulling one gear out of a massive framework, which then stops the entire machine from functioning. Though now we can actually move on to the being that is Ange, a strange non-Pokemon that is also noted to be a Pokemon within the files of ZA, thanks to information from Bulbapedia. Before we continue, let's thank the sponsor of this video, Mantis Sleep. They provided me with this little sleep mask, of which there are many other kinds, from cooling to heating to this sound mask that I have in my hands. These masks are made with the intention to block out light and help provide you with the greatest rest when you need it most. With these little cups that put no pressure on my eyes, did not mess with my naturally long eyelashes, and were very comfortable for my very sensitive skin. so I was already falling in love when I first put it on my face. But to make this mask even better is that on the sides it has these Bluetooth speakers that allow me to listen to rain or music without disturbing my partner at all. I also can't see right now, and if I bring the light any closer, it means nothing whatsoever. And you can see how bright this is, and I can just stare directly at it. I do not recommend staring at the sun while wearing this for your own protection. Neither does Manta Sleep, but I feel like I could block out the sun with this mask. So you don't have to stop there, as you can listen to podcasts, music, whatever you really want while taking a nap in the middle of the day, not just sleeping at night. I know many of you listen to my videos while relaxing or going to sleep, so you could be listening to my voice while using this mask. I really do mean it though when I say I do love this mask, because on a more personal note, not only do I have minor sunlight sensitivity, but also I have tinnitus. And when I got sick and they sent me this mask, it was perfect timing, because my tinnitus was blocking up like half of my hearing at night especially. But with the help of this mask, I could resolve that issue without having to jam uncomfortable earbuds into my ear. I was able to get such a good night's rest that I actually overslept by about 2 hours on my workday. And I will say now is the best time to get in on this, because with code CRYLIC, you will get 10% off on your order. There are plenty of other options available with customization for the eye cups. And if you like white noise, but you don't want it projected into your ears via the mask, they do have a white noise machine with plenty of options available to it for heavy rain, light rain, you name it. So get in on this offer. Follow the link in the description and pinned comments and get 10% off using code CRYLIC and get that beauty sleep that you deserve. One more time, thank you to Manta Sleep for sponsoring this video, and on with the video. Now that we could talk about Ange, I actually want to throw in some information from a trusted individual known as Yveltal. They have entire pages upon pages of old lore of Pokemon that it was supposed to have, in addition to so much more that I would love to cover one of these days in full detail in how they could change the lore of Pokemon and how they were culturally influenced and why they changed. So no worries, I've been given express permission from them, though if you want a head start, please do make sure that you check out their website, which I will link into the description. One day I'll, again, do a video on what they have, or at least parts of it. Now, this little bit of info is tiny, but huge in its implication. Because with all of my claims of Ange being a Pokemon, me swearing it has to be one, of course not only does ZA note in its files Ange as last Pokemon, but Yveltal has been able to confirm a Pokemon by the name of, or at least given nickname, Tower, that was scrapped with the loss of the lore of Pokemon that was supposed to happen within Kalos. Now, with this, while it effectively means nothing, as Ange is still just this biomechanical weapon currently, I still want to hold a shred of hope. Breathe in that copium and pray that Ange does become a Pokemon we get to have. And by all technicality, we do get to have Ange, just not as a direct Pokemon. Ange is consistently claimed to be the Tower, but we know that isn't the case. Ange is the flower that grew 10 times in size that day and nearly erased Lumiose City from existence. And with Ange being this flower, we can easily make the claim that it is the very same flower that Eternal Floette holds in her hands. It's fairly straightforward, but let's walk through the details that confirm this in writing and plot. For starters, the flower that Floette holds is known to be an extinct species that was even rare for the time that it existed. It is a flower granted to her by AZ's mother. This already puts a massive amount of significance on the flower to set it up then as an object of great importance, or even character of great importance. Considering AZ would have made the tower roughly 2,000 years after his mother's death, if you want to be super specific about it, I don't know, 1,940 or 60 years, I don't know. Either way, he may have made it in her memory to some capacity. After all, the tower is not complete without the power of Mega Floette, though Floette doesn't even change all that much in its Mega form. It is the flower that she carries that transforms instead, absorbing that energy. This flower now taking on the form of the ultimate weapon in its design. There have even been plenty of claims that the marble statue we see in X and Y is actually something that could allude to Mega Floette, Florges, or the ultimate weapon as a whole. Though even without that statue, it becomes very clear that Ange, which literally means angel, is meant to represent many things within this world. It represents AZ's mother, the balance of life and death since it gained eternal life and is vital for controlling it, and of course it is the big scary plant monster at the end of the game. A monster that is contained like a beast, muzzle and all by the intentional architecture of the tower. It means to ensure that they could concentrate the life energy and release it where they intended to, like a beam. This guardian angel of Lumiose is effectively not only Xerneas when activated, but is more aptly one giant Menhir stone. This is because it takes another Pokemon to activate it, and throughout all the years it has been absorbing energy into its body from the environment. Every time a Pokemon Mega evolved, every time a Pokemon transformed or regularly evolved, and potentially any time a Pokemon or human died, this machine proceeded to absorb energy. This could be through convection, emission, or conduction, the three means by which Lysander Labs makes very clear as to how Pokemon energy can be absorbed or flow. To explain better, convection is the process of heat transfer through the movement of fluids driven by differences in temperature and density. We know that many Pokemon actually heat up right before evolution, during it, or even during Mega Evolution. Emission is discharge, something that is released, and every time a Pokemon Mega evolves, all those fancy little particles we see are not just for show anymore. That is the emission of energy from their bodies entering the air. This is doubled down on when we do see a Mega Stone form after defeating a rogue Mega Pokemon. And finally, with conduction, the process in which heat or electricity is directly transmitted through a substance when there is a difference of temperature or electrical potential between adjoining connecting regions without movement of the material. That, guys, gals, and non-binary pals, would be exactly what the Menhir Stones are. This is why Pokemon are attached to them, or at least one of the methods that the Menhir Stones actually gather energy or can do so. And this is why Mega Eternal Floette is vital to the process, because even the game itself states that Ange was using Floette's power, its Light of Ruin. The two truly are connected as though they were stone and Pokemon. The final nail in the coffin for this is knowing that AZ made this machine with the intent to share the abundance of life energy held within his Floette. That in a crisis, her energy would be directly drawn from her and released towards people in need. So with that understanding, Ange is effectively a flower grown through life energy, a creature that will change in size based upon the power poured into it, much like any other Pokemon would transform with the right energy poured into them, whether that be into Mega, Terrestrial, G-Max, or more. Though with these three now explained, we only have one Pokemon technically left. But Zygarde is a Pokemon that is best saved truly for last, as this is actually a continuation of my last video, the complete ecology of Lumiose City. And once we close out all the wild zones, then we can speak about Zone 20, the many alphas there, and of course, Zygarde itself as it appears there for our final mission. Picking back up, we now have the coldest zone in all of Lumiose, Wild Zone 12. The place closest to where the Mega Frost last appeared, though once again it had appeared after we had access to this zone, which is perfectly fine. It just means that they could tell that Mega power was spiking in the area and were preparing by cutting off this zone. This place is also called Aimless Park, you know, like not having an aim or a goal, and I'd like to believe that it may have a double pun in mind, considering that this place is theoretically in whiteout conditions half the time. I mean, the Wild Zone jokes about making sure you avoid getting frozen, and there is a Pokemon that is completely frozen as part of one of the side missions here, so there's a lot going on. Now, the largest culprit as to why this place is such a winter wonderland is actually likely because of the Alpha Abomasnow here. A regular Abomasnow waves its arms, and you're instantly stuck in a blizzard, even if it does so gently, not if it has no care in the world. If it gets angry, it will cause whiteout conditions continually to the point where an entire climate may change after enough time. And here we have an alpha version, which is much larger and far more powerful. And not only that, but Abomasnow already dislikes being around other Pokemon. It will come out for a bit of sunlight and to enjoy the flowers in an area, and then it returns to its exclusion. And to take it even further, there are Snover all around it, meaning that they have children that they are incredibly protective over.
This wouldn't be much of an issue were it not for the fact that Snover have little cranberries effectively that other Pokemon like to eat because they are incredibly nutritious and apparently delicious. I wouldn't know. I have not stolen any Snover cranberries. Police cannot prove anything. While Snover will happily give its berries to other Pokemon it likes, there are other Pokemon that can be a bit pushy, and that's when all the problems begin to arise. For example, we have Machop here, who you would expect to be friendlier. But I'm sure there are going to be Machop that will be pushy when they push themselves a little bit too hard within this cold weather. In fact, that cold weather and an aggressive foe are perfect for training for this Pokemon, allowing the harsh conditions to help it evolve into a Machoke here. And Machoke being here makes perfect sense, even if it and Machop aren't trying to train against other Pokemon, as Machoke are stated to often be found in the mountains where it trains daily. And without mountains here in Lumiose City, this is one of the best locations for its personal training, hands down. One Pokemon that is directly noted to be an omnivore, though, within this area, is also very friendly with others, and that's Delibird, a Pokemon that is actually pretty timid around us as a player, running away at first sight. They're also apt to give gifts of food to both Pokemon and humans in need when they visit its habitat in the mountains. And of course, we would find Vanillite here as well, living just fine, with the next Pokemon, as we move along rather quickly, being Snorunt, who's a Pokemon that does eat ice. It isn't putting any pressure upon any of the ice-type Pokemon. It's just not the type to cause conflict, and it's just another timid little guy. I will also note, Snorunt specifically is my favorite ice-type, hands down. It's just an adorable little anxious tint of anxiety. And the last Pokemon that is in this specific section primarily is Go-Goat, another Pokemon that, as we discussed in the previous video, comes from the inspiration of mountain goats, their thick fur helping them stay properly insulated against the harsh cold. And just the same as its previous form, it can survive just fine without food as long as it gets enough water and sunlight, both being in great supply here, as you'll soon find out. The only reason it is a Go-Goat instead of a Skiddo here is likely just because a younger Pokemon like Skiddo isn't going to have all the fat and abilities overall necessary to survive in this harsh condition. And apparently, the reason why the Go-Goat shuttle stopped running in Lumiose is because it's scared of Pokemon within the wild zones. And to be fair, I too would be terrified of massive alpha Pokemon myself, albeit Go-Goat is said to be heavily in tune with the emotions of humans. So theoretically, if the masses of people within this city are scared of wild zones, then that would explain why it would be afraid. Though there is an individual, I will state, named Lugo, who is attempting to restart the business. Now, as we look at this habitat as a whole, even just in this section before we move to the water down below, it feels less like Abomasnow is here because of pressure, and is more likely here just because this is the perfect environment for it. It's arguably reminiscent of Route 216 and 217 within Sinnoh, not perfectly the same of course, but close enough for jazz. Farther away from all of the main commotion, acting like the icebergs that they are, would be both Bergmite and Avalugg. These Pokemon are a bit strange, because Legends Arceus are the only game in which we can find that they have a food preference, though that's just similar to being able to give berries to all Pokemon. It feels more like a mechanic than their actual typical diet. The only thing I know for sure then is that Bergmite freezes the air around it to create its icy shell, while it also avoids any Pokemon such as Glalie who would eat it. The Avalugg are very protective of these Pokemon, and during the day, the cracks in Avalugg's body will deepen only to return to normal overnight, which this is just the melting and recovering of ice through heat and cold. And I would go as far as betting that if it doesn't get its fill of water or stay within an environment in which it can get water and freeze it on its body, that those cracks may never recover. This is why it stays within the water, and it is once again thanks to this very specialized environment that we get its fixed alpha here, not because of pressure from other Pokemon. It's actually shocking that we don't see Glalie or Frostlass here, but it seems to make it clear that the wild zones may be self-regulated by the Pokemon within them, made up of Pokemon that are going to help protect each other primarily, or ensure that peace is kept overall. Regulating each other even if it's a bunch of carnivores going after carnivores, because of course there are exceptions, but the cycle of life and death is still incredibly important in the ecosystem after all. At the end of the day, these ice Pokemon effectively understand that through the collective efforts of each other, their new home can stay healthy and cold just the way that they like it. And before we continue, I just want to say thank you for watching. If you're enjoying this so far and you're new to the channel, I release weekly deep dives, multi-hour deep dives every single week. So please make sure that you do subscribe. Leave a comment on anything that you agree or disagree with. I enjoy reading the comments and learning through you guys anything that I may have missed or any evidence that might go against what I've claimed. That's part of the scientific process, baby, and that's the fun of what we do here. Plus, comments and watch time are the #1 way to help boost a video on a channel, as said by YouTube itself. You can also hype a video and just share this with your friends. If you'd like to go the extra mile, you can become a member of the channel for as little as $3 a month, which gets you behind the scenes access. You get to hear your name at the end credits of every single video, and you overall support this channel and videos for everyone to see. Also, I highly recommend join the Patreon for free. That way, if we get a minimum of 100 people on that Patreon total, I will start doing monthly newsletters in addition to ensuring that you guys do not miss any uploads just because the notification system on YouTube could use a little bit of work. But I digress. Once again, thank you so much for watching, and on with the video. Bugs galore in Zone 13, and because of the sheer number of insect Pokemon, it makes it very clear now as to why the Mega Victreebel had appeared so close to this area within Magenta Sector 9. A Pokemon so gluttonous that even its Mega Evolution produces acid in excess. So this is added in acrylic. I had to check, double check, triple check, then I saw it on stream, and for some reason, this Victreebel decides to appear or be placed within where Wild Zone 18 would spawn, which doesn't make sense for where the Weavile appear, but it makes sense for where a Wild Zone appears. Now, there's a warning placed here as well, stating how the bug Pokemon will attack interlopers relentlessly, which is not something that you would expect of Heracross and Vivillon, but of course you would expect and fear from Pinsir and Scyther. Actually, you know, this section just makes me think of National Park within Heart Gold and Soul Silver specifically. There were more bug Pokemon, of course, there, but it still included Scyther and Pinsir, alongside Butterfree as a flying bug type instead of, you know, Vivillon. Of course, mainly because, you know, Vivillon didn't exist at the time, but you get where I'm going with this, I hope. Now, Pinsir and Scyther can be pretty aggressive, as I'm sure you know, with Pinsir going after the same sap that Heracross will drink down and even hunt after other prey, crushing them with its large pincers, you know, Pinsir. Though something that has been made clear in the past is that while Pinsir and Heracross have a rivalry, when there is a common enemy such as Yveltal, they work together peacefully. I would then like to propose that the groupings of Scyther found here at night would be the common enemy, as they cut down the very trees that these two Pokemon love to get their sap from, all while Scyther will still actively attack any other bug Pokemon for their own fill of food. They are aggressive and very carnivorous Pokemon. Heracross never actually states anything about eating anything other than sap, but at least with Hercules beetles in the real world, you can expect them to eat decaying fruit, in addition to tree sap, while larvae may eat rotting wood. So it's actually not so strange that Heracross would have a sap-only diet. Though if it is a Pokemon that ate rotting wood, we have the perfect culprit for creating plenty of roots within this area with their own undead power, Phantump. Phantump itself is pretty chill. They just want to play, they want to have fun, especially when the rumor of their creation in world is from a child that got lost in the woods and died. It's actually even more messed up if you look at the possibility of a child walking through this zone and getting slashed amongst the trees that Scyther cut down. Modern day creepypasta right there for you. Just started up in Lumiose City. Get the Lavender Town syndrome just started back up all over again. We do know that Phantump and the fixed Alpha Trevenant are responsible for the many roots that we find here, as not only are they the only other grass type, but there is a whole side quest about Phantump creating a ton of these roots by a water fountain. Not to say that they are the only reason for the roots, which they are not, but they are the primary reason in this wild zone at least. Now though, we have to question the presence of Trevenant. It's a Pokemon that traditionally is very protective of forests and small Pokemon, and Phantup is the only actual small Pokemon in this area that is fairly defenseless. Because, though, of the aggressive nature of other Pokemon we have here, I would even expect that Trevenants may not be as much a guardian of the area as they are just primarily a guardian of their Phantup, making them a far more lethal creature in this area as it rages on as its alpha form. We can only hope then that it sees Heracross and potentially even the Vivillon here as friends, as they are some of the least aggressive here towards other Pokemon, assumedly. And Vivillon doesn't note that it eats or hunts anything, but you can either say that it continues to eat poisonous foliage or drinks up that good sweet nectar as well. Or both, realistically speaking, I suppose. If only the foliage that Phantup and Trevenant created were confirmed to have some level of lethal toxins within them, then there'd be a really, really nice ecological link there between them and Vivillon. Now, breaking this whole section down, if we don't include the alpha Pokemon, then out of the 6 Pokemon who make their habitats here, only 2 are plants, and Weepinbell is the only one here willing to eat every bug it sees, maybe even the Ghost Child if it wants a light snack, I guess. And with that bit of info, I love this stupid idea that this Weepinbell, with maybe the ability Gluttony, becomes so excited and happy to see many of these Pokemon that it actually mega evolves just so that way it can eat more. It's like loosening its belt. Though, of course, eating more means that it needs more acid in its body, and it kind of backfires a little bit as it now has to use a different type of hunting method. To support this stupid idea of mine, the Victory Bell trailers actually take place in this zone. It's why we get to see it chase the same Pokemon we see in this section, which is a pretty clever detail, I have to admit. Ultimately, this section is just a natural buffet that tries to fight back. It's kind of like a living fridge that when you open it up, it tries to slam itself down on your head whenever you peek inside, allowing the evolution then of not only the bugs, but also the eventual mega evolution of that Victory Bell. Another great example of Pokemon simply taking over an area as if they didn't effectively populate all of these areas on their own is Wild Zone 14, the electrical substation. Built of steel, massive conductors, and it's a nice open area for Pokemon to move around freely. Unfortunately for humans, there are a few Pokemon taking advantage of these resources. One of the major players you'll likely immediately see is not just Aeron, but also Lairon, 2 Pokemon you'd typically expect to only see underground. While they both are out here getting their fill of iron from the area, they may actually not be eating the man-made structures here. Instead, there are plenty of spots with dry earth that they seem to stick around the most, allowing them to likely source their food from there. The only strange thing I find then is that Lairon is noted to be very territorial, often getting into clashes with other Lairon for the spaces that they reside in. And while it definitely seems as though they stick to each other and away from other Pokemon, I don't believe they have a reason to be defensive about their territory with other Pokemon to begin with. This is because the Pokemon we do find here definitely seem to have different interests from each other. This isn't to say there aren't any quarrels, but Lairon may just be here due to abundant resources. Though you may also be able to pose an argument that the Drillbur we find here have evolved into Excadrill due to these potential territorial conflicts. And to add another alternative reason as to why this may happen, Lairon may actually be attacking Drillbur for the nests that they make. After all, these little moles can dig very easily into the land here, making it far easier for both Aeron and Lairon to get their fill of iron. They aren't battling over food resources. Aeron and Lairon may just be a bit of a bully here as a possibility, invading Drillbur's spaces up to the point where Drillbur is antagonized so much by these 2 individuals invading its territory that it eventually evolves into Excadrill. And you'd think that evolving would solve your problems now that you're bigger and stronger, but now part of your body is made of metal, meaning that Lairon would be even more interested in eating you. Thus, the advent of the fixed alpha Excadrill that we then find here, which is its own level of extra defense, becoming stronger, pretty straightforward. One other Pokemon popping up on occasion is Onix, who most Pokemon understand not to mess with. This is primarily because Onix is typically a massive monstrosity that creates fast tunnel systems for other Pokemon such as Diglett, though it's pretty puny in this game, and a lot of Pokemon kind of are. Now, I'm not entirely sure why Onix is here other than it popping up due to the commotion here, though you could say it may be hoping to absorb more of the iron deposits that must be in this area, which is why we have, again, all these other Pokemon here, eventually allowing it to turn into Steelix naturally, rather than having its body get slathered in a metal coat of human design. The last Pokemon are actually ridiculously elusive, one of them for no good reason whatsoever, as gliding down from on high is Emolga. It roasts berries and eats bugs, so you might be asking, why in the world is it here when there are no prey for it? Well, there are 3 reasons, potentially. One is because, once again, poor Drober might be bringing up insects from the deep underground, and Emolga is swooping in to steal them. Reason 2 is because there are great vantage points in this area, and much like a bird, Emolga will sit in tree branches in order to eye up its next target. And lastly, reason 3. While it can generate its own electricity, there are many electric-type Pokemon that do enjoy just absorbing energy from their environment when they can, making their lives a lot easier. But the last Pokemon, and the one that avoided me the most, even when the conditions were supposed to be perfect, was Helioptile. The adorable little Helioptile has plenty of places to run and hide around here. There are even the massive boulders created by the other Pokemon that then could serve as perfect little perches to sunbathe. The most important activity for a Pokemon like this. They only appear during the day and when there's sunny or clear weather, as they need to be able to get as much sun as possible to stay healthy. Without it, they will grow weak and pretty quickly potentially die. And you know what? I don't think enough praise is given to Helioptile and Heliolisk. They are solar-powered lizards, not just in the cold-blooded sense to warm up, but literally all they have to do is absorb sunlight all their lives, and they never even have to eat. And they get little, cute little frills to boot. Now, considering this substation likely lets off a lot of heat, or at least the lands under Kalos, or specifically Lumiose, releases plenty of geothermal heat as evidenced by the Gibble in Wild Zone 8, I would like to believe that Helioptile just dives underground on the most dreary of days, when there's no sunlight, and this really does exemplify the idea given by the old verses in Legends Arceus, this section, that when man has destroyed the lands and left it behind, the world will eventually return to being a home to only Pokemon, something that I guarantee Pokopia is leaning on. Yes, theory on Pokopia will be coming soon. If you thought Professor Acrylic Ecology was going to not talk about that at all, you need to watch more videos, because that game is gonna potentially have some great confirming lore hidden within it. Moving into Wild Zone 15, this one is another zone in which it definitely feels as though it's just a mosh pit for those that go bump in the night. Except the things that do go bump in the night are still walking around the day. Uh-oh. To put this into perspective, there are actually only a few Pokemon found here at all times. This would include Larvitar, who is basically not even part of the ecosystem in this zone. It sits on the roof above this area and is likely just eating whatever soil it can from what's been planted up there. Really doesn't make much sense to me why they are up there either, unless you begin to consider that this very green Wild Zone was once a nice little place for the Larvitar until the rest of the gang barged their way in. And even if they did become stronger or evolve, they would just be a very sturdy and defenseless Pupitar, making it unideal to stay on the ground floor. The only other two Pokemon we actually see at all times are Pumpkaboo and an Alpha Gourgeist of the medium variety. The thing with Pumpkaboo is that it's just a shadow cat inside of a pumpkin. It isn't the pumpkin itself, though Pumpkaboo love to hypnotize anything that has a soul, and then it and Gourgeist will happily kill them. It doesn't even hide the fact that it drags people to the afterlife, taking joy in their suffering. Pretty messed up when you also take into account that they don't really care how old or young you are. You're all the same 4-letter word for them at the end of the day. Food. But taking a closer look at this zone, we find a number of Pokemon missing from it, and only finding their second or final forms. We find Beedrill during the day and Haunter at night without their prior forms. Both of these Pokemon we know are avid hunters of other Pokemon, or maybe people. We throw in Whirlipede and Scolipede, who are only present during the day, which brings about a high level of aggression within the zone, as if Beedrill wasn't enough angst bottled up into a 4-foot body. This would then explain, though, why we don't find their previous forms, as the beef here is on sight. The second they see anyone or anything that has a pulse, they are battling. Everything just becomes worse when we consider that Scolipede is an incredibly deadly threat. It grabs its prey with its legs, holds them close, fills them with poison, continues biting them, and then slams them repeatedly on the ground. All while being a 10-foot centipede horse, and God, do I fear centipedes, but man! Pokemon's really cool. Unfortunately, Beedrill can't really keep up with Scolipede in this area, in this contest, especially since Beedrill doesn't have a swarm to help it gang up on enemies with, thus resulting in the Alpha Beedrill that we have here during the day. But above all else, there is one Pokemon thriving on the negative emotions within this area, and that would be Shuppet, a Pokemon that does consume negative emotions as its meal and as a form of gathering strength, though it is also through Shuppet that negative emotions go away. What does this mean? Well, it could mean that the only reason this zone isn't painted completely red at all times is because Shuppet is able to quell at least some of the negative emotions within this area, though it can only do so when it appears at night, meaning that all is not always well within the zone even with Shuppet's help. And to drive it home, we do get a fixed Alpha Banette at night, the pinnacle of negative power, of grudge energy, something that I am sure the aggressive Pokemon in this area hold against one another. Banette doesn't really need to do anything else, it just gets the vibe at this point. At best, it's just continuing to soak up all the energy within the zone. Every battle bringing about more anger, more seething rage between Pokemon as they protect their territory. All up until we find out that the Rogue Mega Banette appears closest to this zone, meaning that what happens here only helps drive the Rogue Mega into existence, which is what happens with many of our wild zones. Well, actually, by all technicality, it's not the wild zones that drive this to happen. The wild zones just appear where the Mega energy is being measured to be its strongest. Then Quasartico throws up the holographic walls and hope for the best, that the Mega does not appear, and if it does, that hopefully it will be contained. But even then, not a single Mega Pokemon is contained in the slightest. Not until Jacinthe, throws out her own personal Jacinthe zone does this actually end up working. Please, somebody get that Fey Queen in here. We need her fairy magic. Science and technology are failing us in this world. Wild Zone 16 has another one of those fancy, strange obelisks, though this time we have a very timid Froakie sitting on top of it. No idea what the symbolism of that is supposed to be, but it's there, and despite being a frog, there's no real confirmed diet as to what Froakie eats. Frogs are also a little bit strange. As tadpoles, they're primarily eating pond scum and whatever plants that they can really find, but as they become a frog, their diets change to effectively be primarily, or if not solely, carnivorous. In the case of Froakie here, it's just born a full frog right out the gate, almost Benjamin Buttoning itself, though we hardly have any data to definitively help us determine what it's eating. With frogs, it's inspired by being the Tungara and Gray Foam Nest tree frog in the real world, who are also creating foam nests of their own, as per the name. Both of these frogs eat plenty of insects and arachnids, which would then just help us double down on this idea that Froakie is eating bug Pokemon. And while typically I would want to use Pokemon routes as evidence towards this, there's one important detail regarding Froakie. It's a ninja. And that sounds so stupid coming out of my mouth, but I am 100% serious. It is guaranteed to not be hunting any Pokemon here, as it is absolutely out in the open, just like the Alpha Fletchinder of Wild Zone 7. As such, because you typically want to sneak up on your prey as an ambush predator, I suspect that Froakie leaves the zone as it wishes, jumping clear over the barrier as it moves to hunt any prey it seems conquerable, very similarly to many of our flying-type Pokemon that come and go as they please. Other Pokemon that appear at all times only include 3 more. One is Phalanx, who are all over the place in this section. I mean, don't get me wrong. They opened this zone after the Mega Phalanx reveal, which is amazing, but these little Kirby Spartans are running all over the place. And the only reason they're here is because they're using the round design of this area as a running track, a training grounds, if you would. And I'm going to be real honest with you. I don't think Phalanx actually have to eat anything. They don't have mouths, they belong to the fairy and mineral egg group, and they just seem to vibe on the bonds that they have as a group. They are a bit of an adorable anomaly in my eyes. This then actually just kind of reminds me that I don't really get a choice anymore. The next ecology video has to be the Galar ecosystem, and that's going to be a doozy to get through with all the weather patterns. Back on track, the other two that appear at all times are Flaffy and a fixed alpha Ampharos, though I find this to be incredibly odd, because the only thing that they really have going for them is the large amount of grass within this area, but there has to be a strong reason for them to be here, something that explains their existence, because spoiler alert, not a single Pokemon hunts any other Pokemon within this zone. The only explanation I have is one of not coincidence, but rather a stupidly fun connection. And I mean really stupid, but fun connection. Aliens are taking Mareep, and it is up to Flaffy and Ampharos to protect themselves. And I know, wild conspiracy theory, but follow me on this. Because the water in this zone is fantastic for a couple of Pokemon. Froakie stays moist, there's a Barbaracle here at night, but its diet hasn't changed. It just means that there's more food for it here, and that's how it evolved. That's why there's, 7 of them instead of the normal 2. But then, also only appearing at night is Starmie. Though the kicker is that I've never found Starmie at night here, with only one exception. And that is after the Starmie Cult event. An event in which you cheer for Starmie from beyond the stars to come down to Earth. That with this group of other people, as you all send your hearts into the heavens, a shooting star actually does crash land within this area zone. And as you run here, you will now find a Starmie within this section alongside a Moonstone for you to collect. A nail in the coffin to show that Starmie really is from space after all these years of it being a rumor or a legend of the Pokédex. What this also shows, though, is that there are plenty of microorganisms in this water, enough for not just Barbaracle to pop into existence, but also for Starmie to choose this as its landing spot despite all the other locations within the city, which is pretty cool on the surface, but then it also makes my scientific mind zoom at 1,000,000 miles an hour as I desire to suck up this water, place it under a microscope, and see all the little critters that are hiding around in this water. Shifting back to daytime, we may find another tie as to why so many Pokemon are here, because this is a very wide open area that is a fair distance from the buildings around it, which then it allows for the weather of the world to crash upon it easily, for plenty of rain, plenty of sun, and a full clear sky to reign above. This would potentially grant greater storms for our sheep Pokemon, while also providing the best opportunity for plant growth. But then with all the sun and plant growth, we get, attracted to this area, Florges and Medicham. We already discussed how this is a solid training grounds for Phalanx, though with that and the great amount of sunlight, it's also a great place for Medicham, especially as it is a Pokemon that only eats at most a singular berry a month. The sunlight is important despite not being stated in its Pokédex, because meditation and the connection to the sun is what is often associated with some stories regarding one's unlocking of their sixth sense, which is something that Medicham has not only opened up, but has also greatly honed as a skill of its own. And I do wonder if the obelisks, now that I think about it, have a sort of religious tie to them at all. I mean, the joke of them being reality anchors or even Menhir stones of their own in other videos, but if they are incredibly important, then they could have been originally a center of worship. Just a small thought before we moved on. Our last Pokemon of the zone is Florges, which is very strange because despite the game stating that they are found in this zone, they are not noted to actually have a habitat within this city. This is likely because Florges, like its previous forms, all reside wherever flowers and gardens reside, not technically within specific habitats. Florges being here specifically is very interesting to me because there are other places I feel have way more green to them, but this Pokemon likes to tend to large gardens, royal gardens even. Anyone who impedes upon the health of their garden is someone who won't live to see the next sunrise. And this also brings a strong connection of Flabebe being found in Zone 3, where we have the royal-looking tower and rose motifs alongside Litleo, Floette in Zone 7 with the other obelisk, and Florges here in 16. There are just far too many coincidences for this to be a mistake, there's got to be something vital about these zones, and if nothing comes out of it, I might just finally accept that I truly have lost my mind, but that is okay. We can move on to Zone 17, which has a lot of heraldry symbolism between Skarmory and Pyroar that do exist here. Though you can also learn about that in my explaining every Mega Pokemon video, because I'm here to tell you that if you respect your own life, you should stay very far away from this zone. The pride of lions that dominates the center stage of this zone absolutely decimated me multiple times over. It got so bad at one point that it felt as though the game was trying to personally kill me through the screen, as there were 3 alphas that spawned all at once. If it also wasn't clear, this is a legitimate pride of lions, with the male Pyroar, of course, being the alpha, for despite the male being effectively the laziest of the pride, it still had to be the alpha in this area, of course. I would say that I'm surprised that anything is alive in this zone, but everything that is alive is staying very far away from the section in which we find this pride. The closest you can get to a non-Pyroar being near this pride is Skarmory, who flies above, maybe getting a little too low from time to time. You might be asking me now, Acrylic, why is that Skarmory here? Why hasn't it been flambéed into a melting pile of steel so that way the Pyroar can eat it? Well, it's simple, my dear. Pyroar explicitly states that they do not like using their fiery breath on any Pokemon that they desire to consume. They want to ensure that their prey is still as fresh and raw as possible, which, while that sounds like a cruel joke, there are a number of reasons why this actually is vital for wild animals. For starters, blood is liquid. A stupid thing, I know, to say in hindsight, but with any predator that lives in a dry savanna or desert, water is of course very hard to come by. As such, the only form of thirst-quenching liquid you can drink down is going to be the blood from your fallen prey, making fresh, raw meat super important. Then we dig into the nutrition aspect of it. For you and I, we need to be careful, as our bodies are not quite built to handle the bacteria that will form on raw meat over time. For example, you can sear a steak just on the outside, and assuming it is prepared correctly and it is a quality steak and it doesn't have any big cracks leading into it, odds are you can eat it with the center being effectively raw. I've done it, I've loved it, but that's just me. Whereas with ground beef, you need to cook it to the proper temperature. And I know if, again, you are like me, you want that burger to be done medium rare. But that is unfortunately going to bring you risk of getting food poisoning from bacteria that has now been mishmashed from the surface of the meat into it and now residing all throughout the groundedness of what you're going to make your burger from. And despite all this though, cooking your food also burns calories off of it. It does also potentially burn the nutrients from it, proteins, vitamins, you name it. But that's why we have to cook our food a certain way. Find a balance between raw and fully cooked, depending on what it is. Of course, no one should be having medium well chicken. That thing needs to be properly done. So that way we can get the maximum nutrition, flavor, and safety from what we consume without risk of illness. Meanwhile, the powerful natural predators of the world can just devour that meat without a second thought, get every single calorie they need, and survive better until the next time they're able to get their claws on another delicious morsel. Something that may happen tomorrow, may happen in a week, or God forbid, the creatures that last upwards of a month or longer without a proper fatty meal. If reincarnation is real and I am brought back as one of those animals, no thank you. Just send me back in line. Long story short though, Pyroar choosing not to cook its food is the smartest decision that it can make regarding its health. It's a big boy. It needs every calorie it can get to make it to the next meal. For Skarmory, it is floating up on high and is a Pokemon that is a little bit odd in terms of its diet. This is because it has a couple of different animal qualities that place it somewhere between being a scavenger and an actual hunter bird. As such, I've always just said that it does both, with plenty of evidence for both to be true. One such case is knowing that on the lowest level of this zone, we can find both Diggersby and Chespin hiding away underground in the same area. On one hand, Chespin is happily just consuming berries. On the other hand, we have Diggersby digging up roots and plant material overall for its own consumption. And in the invisible third hand that has been looming over our heads the entire time, we have the Skarmory that attacked Bunnelby so many times that we are forced to only have its evolution here. A very fatty evolution that then even helps keep the Pyroar stomachs here very satisfied. These aren't the only ones to have forced Bunnelby to evolve here though, as apparently there's also a Talonflame that spawns here according to Bulbapedia. I never caught wind of it myself, though this would only help enforce not only Diggersby's existence, but also introduce another form of conflict to Skarmory. If you want to take this even further, you can say that these birds of prey are likely another reason as to why Litleo aren't here, and only their evolutions. As a small note, Skarmory does not fly when it's raining out. There's not a specific weather condition for storms, but it's safe to say that if it isn't the risk of rain causing it to rust, that lightning being attracted to a high-flying metallic bird is the clear other reason for it not being present. And when we move up to the rooftops, if, the lions let us, it gets slightly weird. Klefki are up here during the day, potentially waiting for Skarmory to land so it can steal some metallic ions. It could also just be up here due to the vents. But one other theory is that it is up here trying to get its weird little tentacle ring wrapped around Lampent, who only appear here at night. Now I know what you're saying, Lampent isn't a steel Pokemon, Krillin, but it is a Pokemon that has a metallic body. I do find it strange that it makes its habitat here though, without a single Litwick being around, though with just enough conflict and so many Pokemon being relatively close together, maybe it's just having an easier time finding life energy and souls to suck away once a Pokemon does pass away here. The existence of these two alongside Skarmory does bring about the presence of one other unusual Pokemon, a fixed Alpha Mawile. And again, while I won't dig into it, this whole section is kinda screaming French Revolution. Skarmory and Pyroar for heraldry, Mawile maybe representing the guillotine, Lampent for death, and then I'm not really sure what the rest would technically represent. Mawile typically sticks to caves, but is found here for reasons I actually can't quite pin down. The best assumption I can make is what we see with many other alphas that appear without a population of their species in the same zone that they appear in. This Mawile may have come in here following a tasty treat of steel Pokemon and found itself trapped and surrounded by the Pride of Lions. Now it has to work hard to survive and attempt escape one day. It is the same level as our Alpha Pyroar, so there actually may be some level of merit to my claim. Look, this zone belongs to the Lions, and I doubt anything will be changing that at any point anytime soon, so it's their ecosystem. Noted to be an area where scaffolding should be used to reach the rooftops of the tall buildings, while Zone 18 has some high flyers in the clouds of Lumiose City. And in fact, this whole section is a bit of a mess, but we'll get to the reason why at the end. Let's begin with the rooftops and work our way down to the streets. At the highest vantage point, we find Swablu and Altaria during the day, Pokemon that, as any bird does, enjoys a high vantage point safe from any predators that may be found within the areas in which they make their habitats. Their rounded beaks continue to reinforce that they aren't hunters, but rather seed eaters, though you may be able to argue that Altaria has adapted to be able to crack open harder nuts now. It really isn't doing much, but it is one of 3 dragons that has, for some reason, chosen to live in this area, the only other one appearing at night in place of where our birds appear, as we get to see Noibat and Noivern. Now this is a very interesting dynamic, especially as we know that they are avid hunters. More specifically, Noivern is such an incredible hunter that it will go toe-to-toe with Hydreigon and win in lore. The only issue then, though, is that Hydreigon has very poor eyesight thanks to its cave life and its previous form, Swilus, having its eyes completely blocked, so, fighting the 3-headed monster at night isn't really much to brag about. Nevertheless, Noivern is a speedy and vicious Pokemon, especially when you add in the fact that its sound waves that it can emit from its speaker ears can just dust a boulder. Though Noivern don't always hunt other Pokemon. They do enjoy fruit so much that if you give them their favorite fruit, they'll stop attacking you, stop being aggressive altogether. But something still feels off as to why it's here, something that we'll explain on the ground floor. The only other Pokemon on the rooftop is actually past where our flying friends reside, and it's Fennekin. And now, in real life, I've run into foxes during the day and at night, very active, very happy, very yippy, with Fennekin being no different as it can be found by itself at all times. And typically, you would find that foxes will be omnivores, eating anything smaller than them. As such, you might expect that it is trying to sneak up to catch a tasty meal of Noibat and Swablu, and I would be inclined to agree. It would explain why we only see one here, and why the second it knows that we've seen it, it runs away. It's trying to ambush its prey. But this little Fennekin can't be the primary reason as to why Altaria and Noivern are here, at least in my opinion. Rather, it is what we see on the ground that gives us two things. One, what the primary meal of our rooftop predators are, and two, the monster that dominates the streets of this zone. Our primary meal may have very well been a Beniri, as evidenced by the Alpha Lopunny that is here at all times, and yes, as a side note, I don't get so many complaints as I used to when it comes to pronunciation of Pokemon, but while I just mostly don't care about your pronunciation versus mine, because say, things however you want if you're happy, I have honestly only ever seen one person pronounce Lopunny's name correctly, and I'm not one of them. Lopunny is the proper way to say it, like a lop-eared rabbit. I believe I can thank Ruby Ryder for that one, so thank you, Ruby. Anywho, with giant bats, foxes, and things on the main street you likely already know about, but I just keep teasing you and not saying what it is for no reason whatsoever, Beniri was undoubtedly constantly attacked. Though, why do I say this? Because when we do look at the nearby area where we find a Bagon, it's a small enclosure with plenty of grass. A great hiding place for any timid Pokemon that needs to get their foliage freak on. Not mating, I mean eating all the greenery. Please, of all the Pokemon I just said that with, why did I say it about the rabbit? But for some reason, we find it in another very enclosed space. A space with tons of boxes and scaffolding. A place where it can easily hide from anything that flies in this wild zone. Neither Noivern nor what I will now reveal as the fixed Alpha Salamence will easily get to where Lopunny is. Their wings, or body in Salamance's case, are far too large and would make it difficult for takeoff or squeezing through here. Meanwhile, Lopunny is the last of its kind, still able to fight and having to fight to survive from time to time, making mad dashes for its fill of food, thus explaining why it is specifically an alpha here. Now, Bagon makes way more sense being here now that we've established that this wild zone has a great vertical advantage from the ground for Bagon to jump from. This crazy Pokemon only surviving because it has that thick padding on its skull. Otherwise, with all the jumping from high ground to low ground that it does, you'd expect Bagon to perish. But its biology magically decides that it should evolve into what it wishes to have the most: a body with wings capable of flight. This constant action of jumping to bash its head into the ground as it tries to fly like the baby bird it isn't will continue to consume Bagon's every waking moment. We know it eats, but it kind of just doesn't really care to. Same thing kind of goes for Shelgon, even though that's not here. It is thought that they don't eat because they believe that it helps them evolve faster. Not humans, Shelgon itself, which gets into a whole other slew of questions as to why we know what it thinks, but whatever. And as for Bagon, I just have never really been able to pin down what it eats. I've just always just kind of marked it up as an omnivore. And while I still strongly believe that it is simply an omnivore, we can see that it really doesn't have any limits whatsoever and may literally just be an opportunistic omnivore. And the reason we actually have the Alpha Salamence rather than a regular Salamence is because not only are the Bagon working their way up the building, having to navigate the course to get up there, unless they're just, jumping up the walls of buildings, but they also have to fight the Pokemon residing on top of the roof that are being incredibly protective of their homes. And despite Swablu being peaceful, I was very shocked when Altaria came flying up to attack me. And I don't have any other locations to compare this behavior to, but this game has done a very fantastic job of mostly keeping to the behaviors that the Pokemon are described having within the Pokédex. So why change Altaria here? Why have it contradict its Pokédex, its sweetness, how calm and friendly it is? Again, it's all because of its proclivity to protect its little Swablu babies that are resting up here. Same can actually be said about Noivern, though that's already a bit of an aggressive Pokemon to begin with, so it just becomes more aggressive. So when you have so many Pokemon that are fighting over territory of the roof as its own resource, space, we get the evolution of all of these different Pokemon, excluding Lopunny, of course. It's, just food, unfortunately, and has to defend itself. Salamence is definitely not going to be picky regarding its meals. Its entries even specifically state that it will compete with Garchomp mid-air as they hunt for food. This only gets scarier now for our other flying friends, as they've been given even more of a reason to be so protective of their young, especially as this Alpha Salamence is seen at all times within this zone as a fixed Alpha. But we then transition from scary to nightmarish, as Salamence is described as a Pokemon that, if enraged, loses all sense of self and flies into a completely uncontrollable rage, destroying everything around it until it tires itself out. So you're telling me, not only do we have a larger than average Salamence, but since it is an Alpha, which are generally raging and very territorial all the time, we effectively have arguably the most dangerous wild encounter within all of Legends ZA right here. Great! Look, Lumiose renovation plan may just have to turn into the Lumiose evacuation protocol, with Pokemon like this flying around the place. Easily one of the worst places to live. Do not rent an apartment here. Which, speaking of, before we move on, now that we've revisited Lumiose, I might just have some fun and remake the best place to live in Pokemon video. Maybe I'll make it like the worst place to live in Pokemon. I don't know. You guys had a lot of different arguments for that video, a lot of different comments, and I loved it. All the different perspectives. Probably, arguably, has my favorite comments from any video, bar none. Let's take a trip to the park. At least I would love to enjoy the greenery in this scenery, were it not for the Mega Venusaur that appeared here, rampaged as a rogue, and then this area had to be transformed into a wild zone afterwards. But why? Well, why is it that in this specific scenario we had a rogue and then a wild zone pop up after them in direct response to them in this specific area where it was, instead of us being able to anticipate the event ahead of time? Well, we might need to look at how Bulbasaur itself acts, or how it does like grasslands and forests within Kanto. Likely enjoying the great level of cover paired with a very open sky for all the sunbathing it needs so it can photosynthesize more and more over time through its evolutions here, this location is an amazing spot to also relax and overlook this city. And Venusaur may have thought the same, these Pokemon typically being guardians, ones that will protect others, especially children or younger Pokemon or others of its own kind. When we put all these pieces together alongside some of the Pokemon that we do find here, it makes perfect sense as to why Venusaur was here. Just as the rogue Mega Absol appeared in the beginning of our story to warn us of the oncoming disaster, it is this Venusaur who appeared to keep innocent lives safe. Unfortunately, both Pokemon would succumb to the immense power that would be poured into them as they Mega Evolve and lose control of themselves. And during the fight with that Mega Venusaur, it's releasing plants, it is growing things, so its energy may have still spread into this area. And to support all of this, one of the only Pokemon seen during the daytime and only within the same exact spot that the Venusaur appeared is Drampa, a Pokemon that is usually incredibly gentle, eats berries, and is also incredibly protective of young Pokemon and children. In fact, this isn't the only time that Drampa and the Bulbasaur line have been associated with one another, because within Pokemon Snap, you can even witness Drampa and Bulbasaur interacting with each other, how Drampa will fly while carrying Bulbasaur and will become enraged if you bully them. These two Pokemon are thematically tied in their behaviors, and to place them both within a zone like this is perfection. Their goal of protecting younger Pokemon stays consistent when we look at the rest of the encounters. Appearing only at night, we get Cleffa and Clefairy, primarily standing in that man-made structure with, one last time, clear visibility of the sky and, more importantly, the moon that they worship. There have always been claims that the Clefairy line eats other Pokemon, and while I've acted super frustrated in opposition to this, I strongly believe that this zone helps clarify even more that they are Pokemon that are not eating other Pokemon at all. They truly are just dancing in the moonlight, drinking water in the morning, and maybe you could claim that their natural diet consists of berries if we want to consider the diets of many of our other Pokemon here. There is a fixed alpha Clefairy at night, of course, all because it is likely supercharged with all that good moonlight energy, allowing it to not only evolve, but to reach this higher powered alpha form. What's strange, in antithesis to this though, is that Furfrou is here in this zone with a fixed alpha of it during the day, which seems a little scary on the surface. Also have to give credit to Kelsey Hoover in the comments, also thank you for being a member of the channel, for correcting me on the last eco video as I mistakenly claimed that the canal was the only place where this Pokemon spawned. I have no idea why I claimed that when I had made an outline of the entire 2 videos, got all the footage, and then wrote that final script. My only excuse, I was probably tired, but I do actually appreciate the very kind correction that I did receive and the remainder of the comment. Because in addition to that comment, her own claim was an interesting one we should absolutely consider. Because not only do we have the assumed omnivore that is Furfrou, but we also get Eevee here, which makes for an interesting fox and the hound situation. And that might actually be the best way to describe this, because much like Patrat has been in other wild zones in serving its role, Furfrou within this zone might actually be a patrol or guardian Pokemon. Even if it isn't a Pokemon trying to keep other Pokemon safe here, then it is still a dog in a park, a place where it can have plenty of fun running around with other Pokemon, including other Furfrou. But back to Eevee. I have staked many a claim that it and many of the other evolutions are omnivores, as you would expect from any fox. Of course, there are exceptions, such as Leafeon, but we're not talking about the evolutions. Instead, we've already discussed a fox's diet. An Eevee is a hybrid fox, dog, cat, something that was intentionally designed to evoke the vague memory of an animal that you would see in your dreams and nothing more. I most often see the Eevee here hiding between the hedges, though it never actually attacks until you throw a Pokeball or try to attack it first. It will run back and forth, run all around, make plenty of sounds, but it will not necessarily run away, because the Eevee here are playing with us and the other Pokemon. This further shows that this zone does not have a natural predator preying upon other Pokemon here, and instead they go against the natural order that you may see in the true wild outside of this city. If any of the Pokemon do play a little too rough with one another, there is of course Audino, who is actually found here. There is always that other zone that claims it has an Audino, but so far not even you in the audience have found it there, so I'm assuming it's locked until a side mission is complete, and then you can start finding it there. I don't know. Nevertheless, Audino wouldn't be here if it was a place of strife. It dislikes being around conflict and will turn tail at the first sign of it. It was born to heal, and so it will heal others and keep a good watch over this park. Sort of like a special attendant of sorts, which is kind of adorable. The last Pokemon here is Kangaskhan, carrying, of course, the other baby of this zone. Too bad little baby Kinga will mostly be asleep in its mother's pouch before, Cleffa arrives to play. Kangaskhan isn't eating other Pokemon, it's very much enjoying the scenery, taking her child to the park with the other mothers and their children, and if anyone does decide to hurt her baby or, put them at risk, a wrath unlike any other will be unleashed upon the offender. I wish they did go the extra step of giving baby Kanga within the pouch a separate model so that it could be seen playing as an idle animation. It would be perfect for when you take picture with your Pokemon or when you enter the zone, since it repeatedly states within its Pokédex that it lets the child out when it truly deems the area to be safe. Overall, this area is super simple. Just another park and a bunch of Pokemon effectively representing human life in a very interesting way. Though before we can even move on to Zone 20, we have to take a little bit of time to explore the city and find the habitats of Pokemon who make residence outside of the wild zones. With such a large city and greenery all over, there are plenty of places for Pokemon to make homes for themselves, though some of these green spaces are not what these Pokemon even prefer to begin with. There are some that confirm diets of Pokemon that I've actually claimed for a while now as well. I'm primarily speaking about Spritzee and Swirlix, whose habitat is actually within the market stalls here in Lumiose. Meanwhile, when we look back at the original games, we'll find Aromatisse within flower patches and Swirlix on the route just outside of the berry farm. Here in the market stalls, not only are there plenty of different aromas from breads or flowers, but there are also tons of berries being sold here. In fact, it's the best way to stock up on any berries if you're just looking to buy them. The many different aromas are vital for Spritzee, and in a side mission, it is revealed that the smell of the Spritzy is entirely dependent upon its diet. So at least in the wild, it would make a lot of sense that it would be eating tons of flowers, anything that is aromatic. Though, if you want more explanation on that, you can always check out the complete Kalos Eco video. As for Swirl Lakes, the reason it is located on that route and here in the stalls is because of all the berries being a vital source of nutrition for it. Though, when I say nutrition, I mean sugar. Lots and lots of sweet sugar, which is really all that it cares about. Both of these Pokemon are incredibly docile, sleeping in the area or just watching you as you pass by. Though, if you're like me and you found yourself here early and decided you want to try and catch one, they are a higher level than you might expect and they will bring the heat. There are also a number of Pokemon, moving away from them, that are most comfortable on rooftops. I talked about this in the previous part, but you'll find Pidgeot, Talonflame, and Hawlucha on these rooftops. This is because they are birds of prey. Keeping high on the rooftops is not only a great place for them to find space and rest where other Pokemon can't get to them while they sleep, making sure that their eggs are also safe, but it is also a great vantage point to which they can find prey easier with their sharp vision. What's also funny and probably more horrifying than funny is that a lot of birds will prey upon their own kind. Small birds will still attack large birds, and large birds, well, they obviously can just grab one or two. These creatures, these birds, especially the red-winged blackbirds, kind of just don't care half the time. Red-winged blackbirds specifically being the aggressive miniature cats of the bird world, in my personal opinion. In other words, you could claim then that many of our second form or fully evolved bird Pokemon are just hunting each other outside of the wild zones, though strangely enough, Dedenne is also noted to be a Pokemon who makes habitat in high places. This is not because it hunts for prey, but rather it is a dormouse that likes to absorb electricity from buildings or electrical outlets, and based on its habitats, its very typing, and its real-life inspiration being said dormouse, it is only eating part of that animal's diet as it focuses on flowers, buds from trees, fruits, nuts, berries, you name it. Basically, it just isn't eating insects. Unfortunately, it's definitely on the dinner plate for our bird Pokemon who do hunt. So, hopefully it finds good residence within the flower pots and can continue to pull electricity from homes. A trio who are stated to make habitat in high places but are more likely to be found throughout the trees of the city and not just on rooftops would be Panpour, Pansear, and Pansage, the trio of monkeys who have finally reappeared since their debut in Unova. Something I've well established is that this trio don't hunt other Pokemon either. Instead, they tend to work together, forage for berries, cook them, and even provide healthy water as they share their abilities with one another. They're friendly at the end of the day and are more apt to contribute towards keeping other Pokemon alive than anything else. Dratini and Dragonair also love being up high as opposed to their usual place that we would expect them, being at the bottom of ponds, making their place in the ecosystem a little bit more strange now. I definitely believe that Dratini may have originally been a scavenger, but a lot of comments over the last couple of months and other eco videos that you guys have made have been convincing me that by sitting at the waterfall it tends to be at, it is able to conserve energy while also being able to still get meals brought to it by the flow of water. Not just eating whatever scraps come down, but still hunting in its own special way. This would then line up way better with my original claims that Dragonair and Dragonite are definitely hunting undersea life. Though without extensive sea life here and the ability to fly, there is a chance that they might be eating flying Pokemon. Though we could take another idea into mind, another theory, knowing that with their inspirations, the orbs that they have would be incredibly vital towards their evolution. The orbs hold the power necessary in order to evolve, and in a place like this with excess energy flowing everywhere, it can speed up the process, not caring about food, but rather just absorbing energy and evolving. I'll let you, though, decide what you want to believe. The last few that make their homes in high places include both Absol and Riolu, with the Absol I found being in the Blue District just sitting on a roof next to Area 10, which this specific location is pretty much smack dab in the middle of a bunch of different wild zones. It's watching over the zones, waiting for when it may need to act, and protecting others. As for Riolu, I found it on the big mall that effectively resembles a large track with hills and mounds, a place where Riolu would feel most at home, especially as it has been noted to train by crossing mountains and going into ravines. Though Riolu is effectively a jackal at the end of the day, and much like its evolution Lucario, it is likely hunting Pokemon for food. I always second guess when I say jackal, because it's like Egyptian, coyote, jackal, dog. It's got a couple of weird mixes in there, and my brain always mixes it up, so I apologize if I messed that up. There are also Spritzy up here on this rooftop, but they're seemingly left alone as they breathe in whatever perfumes waft up from the mall below. And if you travel down alleyways within the city, you're less likely to get mugged and more likely to run into Garbodor and Trubbish, who line back alleys wherever trash is stored. As such, people have to keep the trash farther away from their establishments. This also leads to arguably my favorite interaction in all of ZA. A simple one where after you leave the Trubbish away, the person who starts the side quest comes to a realization that even if we want to live in a harmony or harmonious environment with Pokemon, that we should still have some level of separation and distance, some level of personal space. This is not just applying to humans and placing Pokemon in wild areas, it applies to all living creatures, that there is a safe and respectful distance that every creature desires and needs, no matter how much we love and care for them. And it is through respecting this that we can grow to live in harmony together and actually meet the needs of those that live within our world. This applies incredibly well for said real world and animals, that everything needs a safe space for growth. Even if they need our help, our job is to help while upholding safety for them and ourselves. Now, I'm going to get off my soapbox, and Trubbish and Garbodor are just thriving in the back alleys because it's where all the trash is being stored now, away from the public eye and away from where these Pokemon can group up and be shoulder to shoulder with humans or other Pokemon that will get sick from their natural odors. They really have nothing to worry about and are actually pretty docile, friendly even if we talk about Trubbish specifically. Gengar doesn't have a habitat, though I do wonder if it would have one inside of any abandoned buildings. I suggest this just because within part of the main quest, we've had to clear the Gengar line out from a building that was being moved into. So who knows what other buildings may hold. They could be absolutely full of many different kinds of Pokemon seeking shelter. I think, though, it is about time that we move on to Lysander Labs. In this abandoned lab, there are a number of Pokemon that found their way in thanks to it being broken down, and there's a massive hole in the ceiling. It effectively works then as a cave that has been taken over by Pokemon, each section seeming to be a territory for groups or species of Pokemon. Houndour and Houndoom stick to their own open areas. Ekans and Arbok are closest to the multi-level hole, the same place where we find greenery stretching its way down, showing that this has been destroyed for quite some time, likely because of, the ultimate weapon. Even Electrike and Manectric can be found here, often near any electrical equipment, as they are likely absorbing any electrical energy passively or are able to use it for their own advantage in a territorial dispute. Each of these Pokemon so far are avid hunters, strong predators, and they don't really have any sort of advantage against one another. They're creating nests within a place abandoned by humanity and thriving in their own way. Even as we work our way through the next couple of Pokemon, they also hardly have a disadvantage or advantage over each other, making it feel as though the entirety of the labs exists no differently than a true part of nature that has been taken back from a place that humanity once controlled. While these Pokemon may attack each other, and every single one we find within the labs may eat one another, with only exception to 2 lines of Pokemon found here, they may more often work their way into the surrounding area to find food outside of the labs, returning here for rest as they all respect each other's territories for the most part. This is something we can definitely claim with Noibat and Noivern within this lab, though I never actually found a Noibat myself, considering the Noivern stick to the long hallways or tight spaces where nobody can sneak up on them, and that is a bit scary to turn the corner and witness. This location is also the only place in which Beldum and Metang make their habitat in their own little room. I suspect that they, like many other Pokemon, are primarily attracted to the holotech found here. The magnetism allowing Beldum to evolve into Metang, as strong magnetism is necessary for it to fuse with its kind and evolve. Actually, I'm going to correct myself right now. There is a specific side quest in which we literally get to find out that a Beldum is attracted to the hollow elevators and then evolves later on in the game into a Metang. But even if this wasn't quite the case, these Pokemon do still hunt other Pokemon. Lucky us, it only sticks to those with metallic iron in their bodies, creatures of metal rather than bone. Unfortunately, we do have the final room before the Menhir Stone found here, being a room full of Honedge and Doublade, our first entry into this zone would actually also grant us a battle with an alpha Aegislash that will not appear again. These Pokemon are soul stealers, life absorbers, Pokemon without care as to what they consume from, making everyone here a target. Though the only reason they are regulated and prevented from attacking all the other Pokemon is just by the existence, likely, of the Beldum line. Sure, they are psychic Pokemon, something that is weak to the ghost typing of our swords, but that hasn't stopped a number of Pokemon from preying upon each other or fighting back, and at the end of the day, Batang will still clamp onto their foes and rip them apart similarly to their evolution Metagross does. So this whole place is pretty volatile, but there is one Pokemon that was hidden here the entire time. A Pokemon that has been caught for over 5 years, as Project M reveals that Team Flare caught Mewtwo when it was at the Unknown Cave, and they were planning to use it in their schemes. This really just mirrors the Pokemon Adventures manga once more, so if you didn't know that this happens, I may recommend that you check it out. I have covered the red and yellow arcs on this channel, so you should check those out. They're effectively audiobooks, especially the yellow arc. I'm very proud of that. Now, Mewtwo has been a Pokemon that keeps other Pokemon safe. It has attracted all sorts of Pokemon to it thanks to its power, but it has apparently been dormant since the end events of X and Y, and was not even Mega Evolving for Team Flare back in the day when they were conducting tests. But Mabel questions why we have the Mega Stones for Mewtwo, why Mewtwo is reacting now, and what is even going on? And the answer? Probably just, woke up because of the sheer amount of energy that was released by Ange at the climax of our story, in my hypothesis. And this is going to be the primary reason, I believe, why we likely see any Pokemon appearing within Lumiose for a while, especially legendaries. No different than why regular Pokemon are showing up here. As a side note, when I did go to complete this mission, I made the mistake of only having 4 Pokeballs on me, and of course that failed. I beat Mewtwo, had to try and recatch it, and it was very embarrassing as the artist I like to commission most, Muse Art World, was there to witness this, and yeah, that was just painful. The skeleton of Prism Tower left behind after Ange's Hyper Rogue event. Here is the center of where all of the Mega energy was being held, and now under the tower, you will basically always find 2 alphas spawned in, drawing in the energy that is left behind from that event. These alphas, I did not get footage of every single one, because it would be ridiculous to actually try and get it, especially as effectively every single Final Form Pokemon can be an alpha here, and it's completely randomized as to who appears. So you won't find an Eevee here, but you will potentially find an alpha of all the evolutions, or Alpha Dragonite, Alpha Vanilluxe, so on and so forth. And on my run into this area, while trying to get footage for this, I found Alpha Raichu and Leafeon. You probably won't believe me, but I swear I wrote that part of the script before even knowing that a Leafeon was gonna pop up. The rest of our common Pokemon appear at all times and at all weather, as per usual, though it takes a couple of runs around the area to see everything, and those alphas do respawn, and no! Nobody wants to be a friend here. They're all aggressive, except for Gardevoir, who just doesn't run away, floats away, but I digress. The first area we will talk about is an area full of metal and debris, as we find Aggron, Scrafty, and Garbodor. A full-on Aggron is here, which shocked me a little bit, which is a little bit wild to say, but with all the destruction that occurred, someone has to clean up the mess. In fact, Aeron has been used to clean up metal by humans, at least in the anime, specifically within the Latios and Latias movie. And with enough metal, it could, theoretically, gain the energy it needs to evolve all the way to Aggron. And with it being such an aggressive and territorial Pokemon, you would think it would be dangerous, but it isn't. In fact, Aggron patrols its territory and is a Pokemon that will move topsoil, plant trees, and restore any territory that it claims as its own. It is a Pokemon that sees Lumiose as its home and is working to help restore this area that it is now claiming as its territory. For Scrafty, it is typically another territorial Pokemon, set to attack anything that does enter what it calls its home. They don't leave for long and are not trying to actually be antagonistic, it turns out. They are working to take good care of its loved ones and its turf, meaning that once again, we have another Pokemon that is actually not fighting others, but rather helping restore the area here, creating a pattern that we are witnessing. As for Garbodor, we can assume that it started out as a Trubbish within this area, and through the consumption of other raw materials or toxic materials, moreover, it has grown in size and of course strength. The pipes in his hands aren't for show. Those are likely metal pipes despite it not being a steel type. This just serves to tell us just how many trash heaps there were after the massive amount of destruction, especially considering this is literally the trash heap Pokemon. Moving around our circle, there is a rocky, almost desert-like section that has Tepig, Charmander, Hippowdon, and Lucario. Hippowdon is a bit more strange, but this is when we start to dig into how this land may be transitioning into something new, not just from the destruction, but due to Pokemon changing the land to be more in their favor. These 4 Pokemon preferring to live in drier or sandier climates, and Hippowdon is able to grind down the soil and turn it into sand, creating more and more sand until the section it governs over is to its liking. From there, other Pokemon move their way in. We can make claims then that the Pokemon here are hunting, but that is hard to know for sure considering the imbalance of this miniature ecosystem. They may primarily be coming here for the energy, and many of the Pokemon here are in their final forms with the exception to the starter Pokemon. If the Pokemon do decide to hunt each other in this area, I think we'd want to make sure kids don't come anywhere near this wild zone unless you want them to witness a bloodbath unlike any other, especially as so many of these Pokemon should be far more aggressive with each other and nowhere near each other. There may even be the chance that Pokemon within their sections are working together, aiming to turn Wild Zone 20 into something better fit for their own kind. And this would potentially make the most sense considering how this area is split into so many different sections, so many different walks of life, so many different types of Pokemon. As such, you could claim Hippowdon is eating anything within the ground, how Lucario, even without a pack, is going after any other Pokemon it can defeat and eating them, Charmander is roasting up prey as it deems fit, and Tepig is getting its fill of roasted berries. But then we begin to discover the new problem. If any Pokemon completely overtakes the area, then the other parts of necessary life within it begin to struggle. So, what I truly want to claim is that many of these Pokemon are here to help each other. They are here to enrich the land, take this wild zone as their own, and make it better for them all through their collective abilities. Because we had a section of mankind, we just had a desert-like area, and now we can move on to the watery zone, a section that holds Squirtle, Totodile, Malamar, and Dragalge. And I don't know about you, but not only is Dragalge's presence here strange, but if it and Malamar are hunting, they would decimate a good chunk of the population here. But when we turn this around, we can see that Squirtle and Totodile are here to help increase the flow of water, primarily being attracted to the energy left at the tower and having minor roles, while Malamar has the intelligence to make commands, to direct Pokemon, and to help avoid strife. They aren't an inherently evil species. Those evil scenarios are very rare special case situations. With Dragalge, it can use its acid to burn through tanker holes, meaning much like Aggron, it may be here to assist with the cleanup efforts, and who knows, maybe it broke things down too much, and that's how Garbodor formed here. And finally, as we swing into the grassy section, we have Bulbasaur, Chikorita, Roserade, and Gardevoir. Each of these Pokemon primarily advocating for peace within any given area they reside in. Bulbasaur already protects small children and Pokemon. Chikorita will grow to become a Pokemon that releases odors that can soothe the mind and prevent conflict from occurring. Roserade is a Pokemon that will hunt for prey, but was originally a Roselia who was incredibly peaceful. A Pokemon that only attacks if attacked first. And Gardevoir is incredibly protective of what it loves. A Pokemon that likely loves its home more than anything else and will serve to protect it with its life. No different than a trainer it is said to bond with. It's all a bold claim, but I strongly believe these Pokemon fit a theme of cohesion, being Pokemon that are here not just for the energy that attracted them, but also to come together across walks of life to restore the beauty of their home. Something that we do alongside all of the other people we have met throughout our journey within the main story of Legends ZA. And, as the old verse does say, once it shone upon us all with all the warmth of welcome sun, but now we weep, to grief we fall, starved of light, now it is gone. And some they go, despair withal, in search of it they reel and run. They quit their hearths, abandon hall, and leave our lands to be undone. And when they're gone beyond recall, this land will be a home to none. This land will only ever be a home to Pokemon. Nature is retaking what we took from it. So how about we close this video with the Pokemon that feels like it truly should be the secret mascot of this channel, the Ecology Pokemon itself, Zygarde. I love Zygarde through and through. There's a reason why it's up at the top there alongside Ogerpon, and I don't think anything is ever gonna change how much I love it. The more we learn about it, the better it becomes, and it was already perfect in my eyes. You may have never noticed, but for over a year now, I've had Zygarde in my intro and outro screens for streams, 2 images that I use for announcements, streams, and videos. And my beautiful keeper of the ecosystem gained a new form, a Mega form. And there's a billion theories as to why this happens, but I think it just boils down to the one thing that Zygarde has made clear since the very beginning. It is a Pokemon born of the ecosystem, a creature that protects the flow of life and death, and will continue to do so forever in ways that we may never fully understand. It is through its protection of the ecosystem that Zygarde also receives all of its powers. Its 10% form meant to quickly respond to dangers, its 50% form meant to battle against perceived threats, its 100% form meant to overpower Xerneas Yveltal and any other major threat that it deems world-threatening. And now, its Mega form, a form that you could claim goes beyond, hitting it to 200% just as its new move Nihilite hits a base power of 200, a form and move that would not be plausible without the light of Ultra Necrozma. This is because Necrozma's light shines down upon Alola, becoming a vital part of the ecosystem itself within that region. It brings totem Pokemon into existence, it enlivens the people, new Pokemon forms are found there, and so much more. And yes, I do have an entire Ecology video about Alola that you can go watch, but since Zygarde draws energy from the planet, then it theoretically draws energy from every single form of natural power within this world. Mega Energy, Z-Power, Dynamax Power, Terrestrialization, and beyond. In this way, Zygarde truly is balanced. It gives its all to protect the world, and the world in turn fuels it to continue protecting it. As long as something exists within our world, Zygarde will make it a part of itself. And in doing so, it is nature personified. And through being this personification of nature, it alone is able to define nature as a whole, something that is directly stated within Nihilite's description. This is a Pokemon whose Mega form is born from the emotions of mankind in an unprecedented crisis. But who was to say that this isn't the only time that this has happened? This idea, I will admit, did not start with me. In fact, there are a number of people who thought of this before me, but maybe Zygarde's many forms only exist as a response to the world around it. That without a need, then it cannot provide, it cannot transform. Maybe its 10% form only came into existence when it had to save the people of Kalos from the ultimate weapon when Lysander fired it. Then its 100% form only existed when it witnessed the overwhelming destructive power of the Ultra Beasts, and now this Mega form exists due to a new crisis. And so I will posit this. Zygarde cannot be defeated in lore by anything that is not a literal god. If it exists naturally on this planet, then it is something that Zygarde can tap into, a power it can absorb and adapt as its own, making it the perfect guardian of the planet, a keeper of life and death, for better and for worse. But that is the finale of the Ecology of Lumiose City. The next time I work on an ecology deep dive like this in this series, it will be Galar. So be prepared, and who knows, maybe it'll happen sooner than you think. Maybe if this video, I don't know, I don't want to give a view number, 20,000, 30,000, I don't know, funny number. But for now, I have a number of different ideas that I am super excited for, including a fun little Pokopia video that will explain exactly how their world came to ruin. So stay tuned for all these weekly releases that I do. And with that then, as always, thank you so much for watching. Please do make sure that you do subscribe. Leave a comment on your favorite wild zone, any shiny hunting that you've been doing and having luck with, you name it. Again, comments and watch time are the #1 way to freely support a channel and help boost the reach of a video, other than sharing the video directly. You can also hype the video in the first week of release, which puts it on a leaderboard if it gets enough hypes. It's a whole weird thing still to me. And the last thing, of course, is you can always become a member of the channel for as little as $3 a month to get a number of different perks. It helps support the channel, making sure I can continue making free videos for everyone. And one of those perks is hearing your name at the end credits of every single video, which we're going to go do
right now. Thank you to all the members of the channel, starting with the Gods of Hope, Krill, Final Fantasy 14, Heals for Life, Biggins, Vatty, Nip, Buzz, and Summer, and then the champions, Nias Costa and Joshua Biggins Wilson. The Knights of the Code, Crumbo, Vatty Lemon, Zoomster, Kelsey Hoover Covers, Luke Sasti, Vio, Shiny Gem, Cerebus Boys, Fix My Etcher, and Krill Final Fantasy 14. Plow, Allen, Heals for Life, Bass Molder, Blue Dalek, and Warren Hemphill, and Nature 9000. Then the Wanderers of the channel. Yagal Cal, Star S, Lumina Malwell, Zach Arrowwood, Rita Yon, Samarfe Nadra, Starbreed, Bob D. Fish, Gangle Frez, Tyrone Jones, Electro Lucario, LiveR360, Bex, Nicole Mancayo, Justin Patrick, Just Bad, Brian Millie, CGA, Planet Blob, Evan, Electric Solar, BSL Bay, Ruby, Jalon Dean, Desporty Yampers, Lakes, Keep Moving Forward, Suki Satsuki, 232, The Black Dragon, Knit, Ruthless Hauser, Michael Stein, Jay Gill, Jacob Square, Mr. Helagonal Yips, Super Saiyan Son Goku, Venny Samaru, Max Supreme, Shadowhawk 19, Lost Wisteria, Zakai, Pyromaster, Abdallah Aladi Gaming, Runes, Nat Owl 707, Evil Chan, Micah 626 Gaming, Nicole Manaskin, Kristen, Sandwich, Boss, Emmy, whatever this is, Alolan Figment, Medico, TA73, Sydney House, Miss Zora, Dakota Couch, Bad Sundiver, Drixel, Carl Jean, Hunter Alice, Hank Kassam, Brecca, Connell, Hune, Jappy W, Memento Mortem, Marshy, Edward Kasowski, Fenica Fox, Hag, Adicadabra, King Pie, Jack and Frost, Reggie, Snivy, Addy C, DJ Monk 23, Squidwater, Rice Smith, Gamer, Just J, M, MD, Horsewood Cocktail, Muse Art World, Lumiose Scanner 772, Andrew Frostpeak, Anonymous, Summon, Sloth, Nakanuyan, Ian Ray, Big and C Knight, Corn on the Cob, Jericho, Michael Bales, Unseelie King, Thavorian Skies, Daniel Tracy, Garrett Hoffman, Dylan Peters, Malachi Burkhart, Heather Wisent, Ronji, and Eva Toby Icebig. Thank you all for being. Wait a second. Hold on. Something went wrong. That is all the members. Okay, never mind. I thought something went wrong there. I'm tired. It's been a bit of a blitz to get this done. This video is going out, but tomorrow I start the Nuzlocke, so that's a whole thing, and then I gotta do the whole Chikorita solo run, and it's a whole thing. Birthday is on December 11th. Say happy birthday. Don't say it now. That's weird. Why are you saying it so early? Why are you weird? Anywho, as always, thank you so much for watching. Don't think I would do. Please do not shoot each other. I love you, and I'll see you next time. Bye.